Hello again and welcome to the Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video. So today's video we're going to be taking a look at the Armageddon Steel Legion. Now when 8th edition first dropped, I was happily using my Mordian Iron Guard, and I was happily using infantry lists and sort of hybrid infantry tank lists. And it became very apparent that these are very strong elements of the Imperial Guard. However, I wanted to have a proper go at mechanized tactics. Now, a lot of people, especially when 8th edition first dropped, and still to this day, claim that transports are overcosted and mechanized Imperial Guard in general is dead, or at the very least, not anywhere near as effective as it used to be 5th, 6th, and 7th edition. Now, I'd obviously used a lot of pure infantry at this time, and I was feeling the itch to try out a new guard force, so I decided to go with the Armageddon Steel Legion. I decided I wanted to prove, as I proved that pure infantry tactics were the most competitive in 7th edition, I wanted to prove that mechanized tactics were still really, really powerful in 8th edition. And to a certain extent, I've been able to do that with my Armageddon Steel Legion. I still think there was a big debate between whether the best mechanized force is Steel Legion or if it is Talon Desert Raiders. No bias. I honestly think it's 50-50. It's purely a case of, do you want durability or do you want mobility? That's purely what it comes down to. So I've been extensively using Armageddon Steel Legion, and I played a little bit of Talon, but we're going to be focusing on Steel Legion today. And my tactics have evolved. And so what I want to cover today, I've waffled on a little bit now, what I want to cover today is the evolution of my Steel Legion tactics, what I found has worked and what hasn't worked. This is purely with a traditional mechanized Steel Legion army. We're talking chimeras, with infantry, with a few support elements. What has worked, what I found hasn't worked, and where I will be taking my army going forward. How my tactics have evolved yet again. So, when I first started using my Armageddon Steel Legion, I took quite an eclectic mix of chimera loadouts. Tried a lot of different variations. Tried multi-laser, heavy bolter, multi-laser, heavy flamer, heavy bolter, heavy bolter, heavy bolter, heavy flamer. And even tried out a couple of the forge-wheeled ones as well. Just proxied them. And I also tried heavy stubbers versus heavy bolter versus storm bolters. And I narrowed it down, and the conclusion I came to generally was that the double heavy bolter chimera is the most efficient for points. Okay, and heavy stubber versus storm bolter was a relatively moot point. The heavy stubber has the extra range and has 3 shots, but is heavy, so if you move, you might as well to hit with it. Whereas the storm bolter allows you to get close. Allows you to always hit on a 4, but you have to get close to get the 4 shots. And what I found was that I was generally, with the Steel Legionists, I wasn't punching holes through things. I was gun lining and then moving after a couple of turns, or sending out lone wolf squads and stuff. So I found, personally, what I found to be the most effective was double heavy bolters, heavy stubber. That allowed me to have 9 shots at a 36-inch range. That 36-inch range really lets me cover most of the board. And I have 6 chimeras, 4 heavy stubbers, 4 points per heavy stubber, 6 heavy stubbers. So it's 24 points. It's not a huge amount. And what I was finding is that as long as my heavy stubbers killed 1 or 2 models, marine equivalents. There's always going to be a couple of tactical marines or chaos marines. They just killed a few models. They always got the points back, and they've never failed to do that. So that's what I found was most efficient. Allowed me to stay, because obviously 8th edition is still very much a shooting game. But what that allowed me to do is to stay back and engage the enemy at 36-inch range with maximum firepower. and especially 36 range for most armies is their maximum range, or getting close to it. And for my Steel Legion, it's my minimum. And so what that really allows me to do is just to maintain distance for a couple of turns. And in proper long-range firefights, when it's my shooting versus their shooting, having all the 36-inch range firepower is really good. And it's cheap. The problem with heavy flamers on chimeras is it boosts the price to the roof. Heavy flamer is the same price as 2 heavy bolters, 1 point more even. So, there you go. Now, obviously, I had to work out what I wanted to put inside these chimeras. So now, I quickly discovered that I was going to have to take infantry squads over veterans. Now, traditionally, veterans and chimeras have always been the way to run mechanized armies. And I'm not denying that in a more hybrid list, that's the way to do it. But unfortunately, not unfortunately, but what I found to be the case was that you needed a brigade. Okay? There's generally no excuse to not run a brigade in an Imperial Guard army. If you're going pure Imperial Guard, you might as well take that brigade. And so if I was going for brigades, that means I need to take 6 infantry squads. So naturally, to me, it makes sense to put those 6 infantry squads inside my 6 chimeras. Now, I wanted to take advantage of the Armageddon Steel Legion trait for infantry, which is an 18-inch rapid fire. So the first thing I did was I just looked, when it came to weapons choices for these guardsmen, is I just was like, let's just get as many rapid fire weapons in there as possible. So plasma guns, they're naturally strong in 8th edition anyway. They're very cheap for guardsman squads, 7 points, and they just allow you to engage almost any target. You know, it really does make the guard squad take all comers. Now, I then put a bolter in the squad as well on the sergeant. The reason for this was simply to take, there's no point, it's 1 point, and again, it's just to take advantage of that 18-inch rapid fire. There's no reason really not to. So, I have to say, my bolters do rarely get a kill, but that's often because my Steel Legion are facing quite tough lists. But they only need to kill one thing. My 6 bolters only need to kill one thing throughout the game, which they will do, and they get the points back. So that's fantastic. Now, for a long time, and even when I'm playing friendly games, I ran heavy weapons in my Steel Legion squads. Heavy bolters, missile launchers, and mortars. They're the weapons I had available. I took the heavy bolters for volume of fire. 3 shots, if I jump out, I'm hitting on 5, it's not too bad. I took missile launchers for a while for versatility. One, if I was jumping out and I needed volume of fire, I can get D6 bolter shots from the missile launcher. That's cool. Or sometimes you just need a bit of extra anti-tank, and there's nothing to be, nothing bad to be said about a cracked rocket. Cracked rockets are just absolutely fine. No, they're not las cannons, but they're still absolutely fine for most situations. And mortars were cheap. Now, and again, added to the bolter round thing, So, the problem I was finding very quickly is that my initial plan with the army was to have my infantry deploy outside of the chimeras to create a screen, and when they got badly mauled or the enemy was, I needed to start moving forward, they could jump into the chimeras and start rolling. What I quickly found was that deploying the infantry as a screen was suicide. Coming from running a minimum of 120 infantry and being able to soak up 30 to 40 casualties a turn in the first turn relatively easily, 120, 150 infantry, it quickly became apparent when I only have 60 infantry that deploying outside of the chimeras means I just lose my infantry element very quickly. Very, very quickly. So what I was finding is I was deploying the Steel Legion infantry squads inside the chimeras. And what that meant was that I was spending points on heavy weapon squads that were spending half the game inside chimeras, not contributing. So I use them in friendly games because it's fluffy and I like the models. But if I'm going pure optimize, I leave the heavy weapon squads out of my infantry units. There's little point in bringing them. They're only going to be used 2 to 3 games, 2 to 3 turns, and even then they're hitting on 5s. And if you're out of the chimera, you've either been blown out or you're marching for to score an objective. So it's always going to be hitting on a low roll. So no thank you. So that had the core of the army sorted. That's the main point. That's the real Steel Legion thing. Chimeras with infantry inside. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, what about tauroxes? Okay, for me, tauroxes, I don't really like the model. That's not true, actually. I didn't used to like the model until I got my stormtroopers. Now I think they look fine. Tauroxes for me, the problem was a case of durability. They're only toughness 6. I needed to present a solid toughness 7 wall. And also was the lack of volume of shots. My chimeras and the infantry squads inside of them are the anti-infantry element of my army. They need to be able to put out a lot of firepower. And let me tell you, 6 chimeras with 9 shots each, plus 60 infantry jumping out with an 18-inch rapid fire range, all with first rank fire, second rank fire, that's a hell of a lot of volume of firepower. Tauroxes don't really do that. Tauroxes have only got the 2 autocannon rounds. And my autocannons are good, don't get me wrong, we've done a video about autocannons making a comeback. 4 shots isn't enough. Especially when, like I said, this is an anti-infantry element of my army. The last reason, though, is the most important one, okay, was the transport capacity. Every single one of my chimeras has a squad. Well, 4 to 5 out of 6 chimeras every single game will have a squad and a character in there. I can't do that if I'm taking tauroxes. Tauroxes can only hold 10 people. Chimeras can hold 12. So you can put your infantry squad in there and your platoon commander. That makes yourself a nice lone wolf squad. An infantry squad without order support is just useless. It's just not going to do what it needs to do. So I then decided it was time to start working on the support element of things. Now, when this list was first being put together, it was what I needed was some way to deny deep striking. Okay, I needed a way to stop my opponents from just coming in and tying up all of my chimeras and my tanks. Now, obviously, deployment can do something about that, and we will be talking about that later. But initially, I needed some way of buying myself an extra turn. And naturally, that led me to I had to fill out the fast attack section of my brigade, because I needed those command points. Guard are very command point intensive. I needed those command points. So, it had to be a brigade. I had the troop choices, but I needed fast attack. Naturally, that led me to Sentinels, because like I said, I needed a way of stopping deep striking from just crippling me. So initially, that led me to Scout Sentinels. And naturally, it led me to Scout Sentinels with Heavy Flamers, because Scout Sentinels Heavy Flamers are very good. However, what I was finding was that due to a lack of other obvious squishy targets in my army, my opponents would consistently shoot my Sentinels looking for first blood, or to score an easy kill point, or to if they got a Maelstrom card that required them to kill something. Often my Scout Sentinels would be the first target, and often what I found was that I was going second, and that my opponent was just blasting away my Sentinels and then just bringing in his reinforcements turn 2, and it wasn't really affecting his overall plan. And we've talked about how some of the most effective deep strikers are also shooting ones anyway, so I quickly realised that Scout Sentinels were not what I needed, and I decided to take armoured Sentinels instead, and this became much more effective. And the reason this became much more effective is, firstly, toughness 6 is an absolute godsend. A lot of the time people will shoot medium arms, medium strength shots at your Sentinels, things like heavy bolters, because of, you know, a few heavy bolters, a tactical Marine squad with a you know, couple of heavy bolter support will chew through a scout Sentinel very easily. Not so much against an armoured Sentinel. And then what really started making me realise how good these things were the fact they had a 3+ save, which meant my entire armoured front, all my vehicles, had a 3+ save, which makes them not an obvious tough nut to crack. And finally, it blended really, really well with the Armageddon regiment trait, which is AP -1 shots. I ignore. It counts as AP -0. And so quickly, what I would find is that if I put one of these armoured Sentinels in a piece of cover, I had a 2+ save, and my opponent would shoot something like an assault cannon, or twin assault cannon, or heavy bolters, or similar AP -1 shots, thinking, oh well, it's, you know, I can chew through that Sentinel, so it'll only have a 3+ save, and then finding it's actually still got a 2+ save because I'm in cover, 50% obscured, ignoring AP -1, and then very quickly my opponent would realise he'd have to turn proper anti-tank onto the Sentinels, which meant that every proper anti-tank shot, like a las cannon, that was going towards my Sentinels, because my opponent was forced to use these things to get rid of my Sentinels, was one that wasn't going towards my heavier support elements, my Leman Russes. But the last piece of the puzzle was finding, I wanted the Sentinels, I still wanted Sentinels to be the first things to be targeted and to die. I wanted them to do that. The key, though, was making it so that the enemy wanted to target them. Now, initially I was running these things quite cheap with multi-lasers, and they just weren't a threat. My opponent would quickly realise that a multi-laser was a pathetic weapon, and it was just not worth bothering with. So I tried upping it to autocannons, especially when they went down to 12 points, and that was okay. That was okay. But what really got my opponent's attention was the las cannon. That really got the attention. Because suddenly my opponent couldn't just ignore them. Suddenly my Sentinels were a threat. They had a las cannon. And even though it's only hitting on a 4+, no one in their right mind wants to let a las cannon have free reign on the battlefield. Yes, it's only one, but then you have 3 of them. That's 3 las cannon shots. If I was lucky, that's 2 hits a turn. Normally that's going to be 2 wounds, and that's a potentially serious amount of damage done to something from a Sentinel. So it meant my opponents had to shoot them. And if my opponents didn't shoot them, then they were getting 3 las cannon shots a turn every turn. And that is going to cause damage. And my opponents saw the Sentinels, well, at least I can get rid of some anti-tank there. And so thus, the Sentinel Fire Magnet was born, and it is an absolute key part of my strategy. Now, Sentinels, the armed Sentinels have also become much more relevant since the big FAQ nerfed deep striking and meant that people weren't going to be deep striking into my face turn 1 anyway, which gave me the ability to maneuver. So armor Sentinels now, especially post FAQ, especially with all the things we talked about, really, really powerful, really good. Now the second to final part of the army that I have evolved was the heavy support section. Now, a lot of traditional guard players, when it comes to heavy support section, will take 3 squads of mortars to fill out the brigade, because it's the cheap way of doing it. However, I'm running Steel Legion, I'm running mechanized, and to be honest, mortars are okay, but I'm not absolutely, this is going to sound like a very strange comment, I find mortars to be perfectly adequate. I don't find them to be this absolutely bunker-busting, ball-breaking weapon that a lot of people say they are. They're perfectly fine, but I've been on the receiving end of a lot of mortars when I've been using my Black Templars, and I've used a lot of mortars, and whilst they're very cool, they are only 5 points for a reason, but they are very cool and they are very useful. Anyway, I wasn't going to run mortars purely because I wanted to have some proper firepower. At this point, I spent a lot of points on some mechanized objectives secured with lots of anti-infantry, and I had 3 las cannons. Now it was time to bring the real big guns. And so it was only natural for me to take 3 Lehman Russes. Now, I did a lot of playtesting, as I do. Tried out every Lehman Russ variant, from the Exterminator, the Eradicator, the Executioner, Demolishers, even fucking Vanquishers. I tried all of them. And what I found was that you needed, what my army was lacking was proper AP. Proper AP. So that quickly, but I also realised that what my army was lacking was something that could go further than 36 inches. If I started getting into a las cannon duel with someone, it's going to take me a turn or two to manoeuvre in position, and that's valuable time lost, and it's also a lot of -1s to hit for me moving around. I'm not Talon, I'm still Legion. So I had to find a balance. So I quickly landed upon taking a mixture of battle cannons and executioner plasma cannons. I should also say that I took 4 Lehman Russes. One of them was actually a tank commander. Now, I took 2 battle cannons and 2 executioner plasma cannons, and that gave me a real nice balance. The battle cannons could sit back and sling out some 72-inch range, strength 8, AP -2 shots. Battle cannons are just a good jack of all trades, master of none, but a good solid pounder. So they were a natural choice. The executioners I chose, one, because I found I could get those cool turrets from Cromlech games, and 2, I really needed to be able to lay down some major AP. I don't know what it is about my opponents, but every single opponent I seem to face seems to be able to make 5+ saves like the 2+ saves. You guys who know my channel know that I talk about Razorbacks as Indostructo tanks, because whenever one is taking a 5+ save, it just seems to make it. So I realised I just needed, I know there were invulnerable saves, but sometimes you just need to be able to just atomize an enemy unit. And there's nothing that can quite do that like a full plasma executioner. 2d6 plasma cannon shots from the top, 2d3 plasma cannon shots from the sponsons. So I quickly found that was what I needed to just... Sometimes you just need to carve up a Razorback. Sometimes you just need to carve up an enemy tank. And like I said, there's little that can withstand a full good barrage from an executioner. I mean, really there isn't. I mean, if you get a good volley off, we're talking, 4 shots from the sponsons, plus 8 shots from, 8 or more shots from the main turret. You're looking at, you could easily get 14 plasma shots for one of these things easily. Now, re-rolling 1's overcharged, you're probably going to hit with about 8. Then you're probably going to wound with about 6. Then the enemy's probably not going to make any saves, or they might make 1. That's 10 to 12 wounds done. That's normally enough to just destroy an enemy tank. And the battle cannons could do exactly the same thing, but just at a longer range. And yeah, I quickly found that plasma, I needed a good source of plasma in the list. I'd already put plasma on every squad, so it was time to... So I just put plasma on every single Lehman Russ. And that really... There's not much more to say about that, but that's 8 plasma sponsons plus... That's 8d3 plus 4 plasma shots, plus 4d6 plasma shots, plus 4d6 strength 8 AP -2 shots. Just a lot of firepower. And 4 more heavy bolters. Now, obviously with all that plasma rocking around, I needed to take some elite choices anyway at this point. And so naturally the elite choices came down to took a tech-boost engines here, and I needed some modicum. I was often finding that my opponents were able to run roughshod over with psychic powers, and I needed some way of just having some little psychic defense. So Astropath naturally came in. Also allow me to ignore cover if I needed it on my main firebase. Now, obviously, at this point, I've been using my mechanized squads for a while, and I've realised that lone wolf squads were incredibly powerful. So that had already naturally lent me the idea of using platoon commanders to lead lone wolf infantry squads. Lone wolf squads being literally, to give a very brief summary, you have a chimera on each flank with an infantry squad and a platoon commander side, and they literally go straight down the flanks, harassing enemy backfield units, scoring ITC points if you play in that format. They're really, really good. So my elite choices actually naturally fill themselves out. I needed a tech boost engine here to repair all the damage I was doing to myself with all my overcharged plasma, because the command tank can only do 2 orders a turn, with inspired tactics. So inevitably, I was finding I was doing about 4 wounds to myself every turn. So I needed tech priest. Naturally, I was finding a modicum of psychic defense, so I took an Astropath, and naturally I needed some way to make the lone wolf squads actually properly effective. So the elite section took care of itself. The HQ section also naturally took care of itself. I mean, I already had the command tank because I needed that tank. I needed 4 Leman Russes because 3 is never enough at 2,000 points. I needed 4 Leman Russes. I needed those Leman Russes. A lot of them are wielding plasma. I needed reroll 1s to stop myself from just blowing up. So that already took care of itself. And again, I had 2 orders for 6 squads. I naturally wanted to have orders available for all my infantry squads. So 2 company commanders, and that rounded everything out. Now put all the pieces together, and what we have is we have 6 chimeras full of infantry. So that's potential, especially if you think about everyone jumping out with orders, 18-inch rapid fire. That is 6 squads where you're roughly doing 40 shots. 32 shots, sorry. 36 shots, my mistake. 36 shots per, plus 9 shots from the heavy bolters, heavy stubbers. That's 45 shots times 6. That's a lot of shots. 270 off the top of my head. 270 shots in one turn if I've got a big orc war coming towards me, or a nid horde that's coming towards me. That's a lot of firepower I can put down. I have the major damage dealers through my Sentinels and my Leman Russes. I have a little bit of psychic support and a little bit of Mechanicus support. So that all worked really well. Now, when it came to deployment, so I found the list was working exceptionally well. You guys have seen the list in action 2 or 3 times on the channel, 3 times on the channel now, and it's won every game so far. It's won against Blood Angels, it's won against Ultramarines, and it's won against Tau. So it's won against, I count Blood Angels as separate to Marines, especially the way Johnny plays them. So it's played against a Xenos shooting faction and won. It has played against a MEQ take all comers mixed army, and it has won. And it has taken on a lightning fast assault force and won. So I was finding that the Steel Legion were performing exceptionally well. Don't forget, it's taken on innumerable foes at this point. It's probably had 50, maybe not quite that many. It's probably had 30 battles under its belt in 6 months. Refining, distilling. So I was finding that any mid-tier army this thing could take on. But what I found quickly was that top-tier armies it struggled against. It was doing okay, and it would lose narrowly, but it was losing. Now this is where we move on to how we've got the list now. 4 Leman Russes, one of which is a commander, 6 armoured fist squads, 3 sentinels, smattering of characters. What it then comes down to is how to use the army on the board. And like I said, what I was traditionally doing was gun lining and then snatching and grabbing objectives using lone wolf squads and using sentinels for dispersion. How I tended to deploy, this is very easy to imagine. How I tended to deploy it was in 3 distinct groups. I would deploy an armoured fist squad, an armoured fist platoon, 3 chimeras, and an armoured sentinel on one flank. Same on the left flank. Same again on the right flank. So that's 3 chimeras and a sentinel on each flank, and then I'd have my fire base in the centre. All my Russes, with a sentinel to help, act as a screening unit. And these forces were all still quite close to each other. So if I need to, a chimera from the left, a chimera from the right could come and support and screen the fire base if needed. So this had worked absolutely perfectly against mid-tier armies, but then I started facing top-tier armies. I started facing Talos. I started facing Custodes, bikers. And what I was finding was that my deployment and the way I was using the army was struggling. And now this is the evolution. This is the next stage, guys. This is what I have learned now. This is where I'm going to take the list next. So what I have been finding is the list has been struggling against Custodes. The reason being is generally they get turn 1, which means you only get 1 turn to shoot at them. And those bikes or if it's Talos, they make a beeline. They ignore your chimeras because they're able to absorb a lot of the damage from those chimeras relatively easily. They make an absolute beeline for the fire base, the 4 lean rust in the centre. And you get 1 turn, and normally you do quite a lot of damage, but then they make contact, they tag up all the lean russes, and it just goes to shit very quickly. And suddenly you're trying to gun down Custodes with heavy bolters, which just frankly won't work. And yeah, and same thing with Talos. They're just tying everything up, and then they just finish off your chimeras at the end. So, what to do about it? Well, rather than deploying in 3 distinct forces, I've decided the way to go forward is to deploy in 2 fighting groups. Each fighting group will be exactly the same. Okay? Each fighting group will have 3 armoured fist squads, standard procedure. 3 squads in chimeras. We'll also have 2 sentinels. Now, these sentinels are going to be armed, due to the points constraints, are going to be armed with autocannons, possibly plasma cannons. Only a 3-point difference. Okay, so you've got 3 sentinels, 3 chimeras in one fighting group, plus 2 sentinels. The key is then to have 2 Lehman Russ Conquerors. Okay. Now the reason for this is that we will not be taking a tank commander. And so what the Conquerors allow us to do is to still bombard the enemy at long range. Strength, 48-inch range, strength 8, AP -2. But we're no longer beholden to the tank commander. Because obviously the tank commander is a very linchpin unit, and if he is destroyed, then it just makes your plasma much more likely to kill you. So, numerous Conquerors all the way. We then need to have a tech priest for each fighting group, because no longer will my tech priest be able to look after all 4 Leman Russes in one place. I need a tech priest per group, because he's going to be repairing tanks from both groups. The nearest Conquerors, I should say before I forget, they are also not quite as reliant on the tank commander, because they re-roll all hits. when you shoot the Stormbolter at the Coaxial Stormbolter, which means they are basically doing the same thing the Tank Commander was doing, which is allowing me to reroll ones to hit for every charged plasma. Well, what's even better is rerolling all hits. So then we have the character support. We've obviously talked about the tech presenters here. We have an Astropath in there as well. And we also have a company commander and a Lord Commissar. Now the reason we have the Lord Commissar and the company commander is basically to fill out. The Lord Commissar's there just because I only really need 2 company commanders in this list. Okay. But I do need more HQ choices. So the 2 Lord Commissars are there to, one, provide a morale boost. My thing I have noticed with my Steel Legion infantry is they get out of those chimeras, they do some damage, but they get shot up quite badly, and then they tend to fail Battle Shock. Or I'm forced to spend quite a lot of command points on them to keep them around, because they're only leadership 7. I'm very used to Mordians being leadership, 8 or 9 with a flag. So I really do need some morale boosting. And that's what the Lord Commissars do. Company commanders there are there to obviously keep the infantry guys shooting. With first fighting with fire, and I have inspired now that I'm not using inspired tactics on the tank commander. I have inspired tactics, which means I can give 5 orders out to my 6 squads, which is more than enough normally. Also allows me. So that's it basically. But then rather than deploying in 3 groups, I'm going to deploy in 2. Now the reason for this is the key. This is where we're going to end the video, right? Why am I deploying in 2 groups rather than two self-contained fighting groups instead of just having platoon, armored fist platoon, firebase, armored fist platoon? Essentially, guys, it's to counter the Custodian's jet bikes, and it's to counter -1 to hit armies, and it's to counter Talos, which are the 3 most powerful things that Guard can face at the moment. They counter the Talos and the Custode bikes because instead of there being one obvious target, there are 2 very distinct targets now. And these armies generally will not have the ability to destroy both castles in one go. So what will happen is they will jet over to one castle. The chimeras will be used aggressively just to charge and to screen. Eventually they'll go down and the Lemurusses will start getting tied up. But once they finally finish with one fighting group, a lot of the Custode bikers will be dead, and the second fighting group will be able to finish the job. Same with the Talos. Talos are not that maneuverable. They're good, but they're not that maneuverable, and generally speaking, they have to be kept in a big blob of 9, 3 squads of 3. So again, if my opponent decides to split up, that's fine. That just means the Chimeras, the Sentinels, they'll be doing screening duty, and it'll take him a lot longer to chew through them. And all the while, my Lemurus Conquerors are just pounding him to dust. So that's where we're going next. The Astropaths are also the AP -1 thing. The Conquerors are dealing with that because they get to reroll all hits. So that includes 1, 2, 3s, and 4s if it's a -1 to hit army. Okay, not just 1, 2, and 3s, 1, 2, 3, and 4s, because it's all hits, not just failed hits. Okay, that's a key distinction. It's to do with modifiers in 8th edition. Go and do a little bit more research if you're not sure what I mean by the difference. Okay, so there you have it, guys. That is my evolution of how I've used my Armageddon Steel Legion, how my tactics have evolved. There are still some things I need to look into. I still need to have a go at using proper counter assault units. Things like Bullgrins. things like Crusaders. I do think these have a place in the Steel Legion list. I'm just not quite sure how I want to fit them in right now. So that, but as it stands, or I should say the Astropaths let me ignore cover. They give me 2 lots of psychic defense, and I can ignore cover on a unit within 18 inches. So that's really useful. So that's it basically, guys. It's a long video, but it is basically my start to finish evolution of my Steel Legion list and the tactics that I use. Okay. From a modelling point of view, I absolutely love the Steel Legion. They're a really, really cool model range. And also, I think the Conqueror turrets fit my Leman Russes a lot better, because I'm using the Cromlech Crusher cannons, and they're little stubby cannons, which do look a little bit like, they're a little bit big for Demartia cannons, a little bit small for battle cannons, so the fact that they could be Conqueror cannons really makes a lot of sense from a modelling point of view. So there you go, guys. I have a little bit of work to do on my Steel Legion. To make this next list work, I'll need to get myself another Armoured Sentinel. I'll have to paint up 12 more infantry, so I don't have to use the heavy weapons anymore. Currently I've just been using them unpainted. And I will need to get myself 2 more Crusher Cannon turrets. But that's all I need to do, and then I'll have what I think is going to be the perfect Steel Legion list. Tell me what you guys think. How have your own mechanized tactics come along? Have you been using Armageddon Steel Legion? Is there anything that I've missed here? Just leave loads and loads of comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.